In March of 2020, a group of video game players, headed by the YouTuber PippinFTS, set out on a project to do the unimaginable. They were going to build a world, at a 1-to-1 scale, in Minecraft. The genesis of the idea was simple enough, and likely one that many have had while playing. With the resources and space available in this continually evolving sandbox game, couldn't it be possible to just port in the world? With the arrival of the Cubics chunk mod that worked around the normal limitations of vertical heights, the theoretical became possible. Another mod, the Terra 1-to-1 mod, imports information from Google Maps and compiles it to create the Earth to scale. Elevation data, accurate ocean depths, biomes pulled from real global data sources. All that's missing is humanity. Terra 1-to-1 does not contain skyscrapers, or skate parks, or houses, or your favorite place to get ice cream as a kid. This is where Build the Earth, PippinFTS's project, came in. The potential was there. The Earth had already been created in Minecraft. All that was left was to rebuild everything that humans had done so far. An extremely ambitious project, it began at perhaps the best possible time, the beginning of the COVID-19 lockdown. PippinFTS's video quickly went viral, gaining a total of 11 million views by October of 2020, and work on the project began near immediately, with technical specifications being hashed out and the workload of creating cities being divided amongst numerous teams of creators. Mojang, the developer of Minecraft, was also quick to support the cause, shouting it out a mere month later, on Earth Day. By this time, over 100,000 people had expressed interest in recreating the world.
In many ways, this project just made sense. Minecraft is a game that begs for creative extravagance, and as early as 2011 with the aptly named InfDev update, players knew that the horizontal size of the map was, for all intents and purposes, limitless. A whopping 4.069 billion square kilometers. By comparison, the Earth only has a total of 510 million square kilometers. But the timing was also perfect. The increasing isolation of lockdown led many to want to bring the outdoors in, to maintain friendships and social interaction in a setting that mirrored the world outside as closely as possible. For many, this impossibly tall task was their own form of escapism, allowing them to connect to the memories of their favorite places.
This, of course, is not a new observation. As Build the Earth gained traction, news outlets were quick to see the project's gumption and teamwork, shouting to the world how this group of gamers had found a way to return to real life. For months, the project went on mostly without a hitch. Practical limitations and concerns about the scale were usually met with a laissez-faire, let's just see how it shakes out. And the general vibe of the contributors was optimistic. And then lockdown ended. No problem, more were coming to the project all the time. But as restrictions around COVID-19 safety began to let up, many started to feel the fatigue of dedicating their time to recreating the worlds when they could just walk outside. While still held in the highest regard, for many it became just another job.
One of the biggest blows to the project happened when PippinFTS stepped away entirely. A lack of communication and coordination, power struggles within the community, and a reorientation of the goals of the project led PippinFTS to take more of an isolated approach. He spent his time designing and building 1,000 suburban homes outside of Seattle and neglecting his income-producing assets for nearly a year. But rather than invigorate him, this task led him to reevaluate his time with the project, realizing that it had more or less taken over his life, causing him to neglect the world outside of the world inside. In a sentimental send-off, PippinFTS announced his departure from the project entirely. As of writing this, it is also his departure from YouTube.
The project did not end there. Currently, there are 45 teams around the world still working on Build the Earth, each dedicated to a city, country, or region. A stats section on the Build the Earth website boasts a total of over 150,000 buildings finished. On another line, it declares that this is only 0.000001766% of the total area of the Earth, 1/10,000,000th of a degree of completion. The project will likely never end. Even if Build the Earth takes down their website and all of the teams disband, recreating the Earth is almost human nature in a game like Minecraft. Instead, the biggest hurdle becomes the very isolation that inspired the project's beginning. How much time can you spend rebuilding the world when it's right there? Here's a confession. I have depression. This is nothing new. In fact, I was one of those lucky few that got diagnosed with it at a very young age. Imagine being in 3rd grade and your parents take you to the shrink to see what's wrong with you and, surprise, you've got major depressive disorder. I'm not the only one, of course. A total of 8.3% of all US adults have reported experiencing at least one depressive episode within their life, with 5.7% having reported an episode within the past year. To break it down further, that number is 6.2% of men and 10.3% of women, with no reporting of genders in between and outside. I'm fortunate enough to have found a medication regimen that works for me, and my depressive episodes have since become increasingly uncommon. They still pop up from time to time, but I've developed a good number of strategies for getting through them. One such strategy is gaming. Again, I'm not alone. In fact, the number of gamers with depression vastly exceeds the standard number of adults with depression, with one study reporting that 26.3% of all gamers surveyed reported experiencing depressive episodes. That's right, your Fortnite squad has at least one person that's going through it.
I'm not here to analyze the causative and correlative effects of gaming on depression and vice versa, but it's hard to look at that number and not wonder what it is that draws so many depressed adults to gaming. In fact, I can't even speak for myself. Sometimes when I'm going through it, booting up a beloved game can get me out of bed or allow me to turn on the proverbial emotional faucet. But when the depressive episode passes, I don't fully put down the controller and wait for the next one. I keep playing. Build the Earth wasn't the only project to start during the pandemic. Another project, just as collaborative but more focused on the emotional rather than the physical, began as well. Hero Journey Club is a group therapy program that was founded in 2021 to mix gaming with therapy. You may have seen ads for it on social media advertising that you can meet with a therapist while playing Stardew Valley. Variations also exist, suggesting that you can crush depression with Animal Crossing. Another version replaces Animal Crossing with Minecraft and features the player pushing a skeleton with a sad cloud pasted over its face into a ravine. The question Hero Journey Club seeks to answer is pretty straightforward. What if we could take mental health support out of the clinic and reintroduce it in places where we feel comfortable? These places could be in Minecraft, Animal Crossing, Stardew Valley, or even Final Fantasy XIV if you're a bit more of an MMO gamer. Sessions are anonymized and group-based, with groups of 5 and a facilitator meeting weekly. There is a program for both teens 13 to 18 and adults 18 and up. The inspiration was just as straightforward. A close family member of CEO Brian Shore was experiencing a major depressive episode during the COVID-19 lockdown, and the only way to connect with him while he received treatment was through online gaming. It presented a place for Shore and his family to talk about how they were feeling in a way that alleviated some of the social pressure.
And the thing is, Shore's vision makes sense. Studies from the past 2 decades on the usage of video games in therapy have shown that gaming helps. One study from the aptly named Games for Health journal reported that casual video games consistently lowered symptoms of clinical depression. Another study presenting pretty whimsical imagery introduced Wii Sports to elderly folks experiencing subsyndromal depression. Over a third of the individuals stated a significant reduction in depressive symptoms. These studies all seem to agree on one thing in particular. Games represented not just a reward, but an escape from the more difficult aspects of reality. The older individuals playing Wii Sports, many of whom suffered from decreased physical capabilities, felt that the game challenged them to do better. A paper published by Springer Nature suggests that not only can games be used as therapeutic tools, but they represent a useful add-on to traditional approaches and are relevant for those who live in remote areas or where healthcare is limited, and particularly during lockdown periods. With this exact wording in mind, of course Hero Journey Club makes sense. But what happens when lockdown lifts?
A line in the Springer Nature paper notes that gaming as therapy is still very much in its infancy, and that there is much to be learned. It mentions that video games that promote a good quality of life are a line to be explored. It notes that due to the continual evolution and variation in gaming, that more timeless games are necessary for this therapeutic approach. Fitting both of these criteria are 3 of the games featured by Hero Journey Club: Minecraft, Stardew Valley, and Animal Crossing. Games that remain largely unchanged in a decade or more. Games that prioritize freedom, creativity, and consistency. But the paper also notes that one of the biggest hurdles to gaming as therapy is the risk of addiction. Ultimately, video games are tools that can be used for positive or detrimental purposes.
During my graduate program, I had a lot of ambition. It wasn't wholly unfounded or anything. I was a talented writer with a lot of ideas about stuff. But needless to say, a lot of the time my ambitions were based in hypotheticals and imagined futures that I had set up for myself. One of these ambitions was receiving the fellowship for my program. For the uninformed, a fellowship is a type of award that selects a limited number of students to provide full funding for. This funding, in turn, allows you the freedom to focus on your research, writing, projects, and so on. The combination of the funding and the prestige of being selected makes application incredibly competitive. Perhaps, egotistically, one of my imagined futures was a world where I was named the fellow for my program. I imagined a reality where my life revolved around my writing, where I could put this award on my resumes, where it would whisk me away to a brighter future of... You get the picture. I had spent so much time imagining this reality that I had thought there was no chance I wasn't selected. I didn't get it. I was absolutely crushed. Suddenly, it felt like my world was collapsing in on itself. All of my dreams of creating and being immersed in art crumbled so quickly that I could feel the dust of them in my hands floating away. I couldn't do anything. I fell into one of the deepest depressions I had ever experienced. And that's when I first found Stardew Valley.
One of the most well-known farm sims, Stardew Valley is a game about escaping. The introductory cutscene shows the main character, ostensibly you, exhausted with your mega corporation office job. In your desk drawer is a letter from your grandfather. It was the last thing he gave you before he passed away. There will come a day where you feel crushed by the burden of modern life, he says in a flashback. When that happens, you'll be ready for this gift. In the letter is the deed to his farm, a place he moved to after dropping everything else. It's the perfect place to start your new life, the letter says, your grandpa precognizant of your eventual need to run away. Laying in the dark, feeling my world upended, and unable to do much else besides play on my Switch, running away was exactly what I needed. I started tending to my farm, growing crops, raising animals, making connections with neighbors, all from the comfort of my bed. I started exploring the mines, discovering secrets, and before I knew it, I felt better. My time with the iterative gameplay gave me ample room to think about everything. I figured out how to accept the rejection, found hope for a creative future, and took the space that I needed to resume my classwork. But after 3 days, ready to leave my depression cave, I didn't put down the console. I kept playing.
In a lot of ways, Stardew Valley is a game about self-care. You perform a series of daily chores that allow for growth and development, simultaneously becoming more challenging and easier as you find ways to address redundancies. Tired of watering your crops every day? Here's a blueprint for a sprinkler. But it's also a game that's kind. In a thorough analysis of the positive aspects of the game, Scream Therapy writes, "We tend to underestimate the power of sweetness, but the congeniality we find in Stardew can work as a salve for our anxieties about the harsher aspects of life. Of course, there are some rude people in Stardew Valley, but show them some love and eventually they'll return it. There's no such thing as failure in Stardew. Your crops don't die if you forget to water them, they simply won't grow or produce resources until you do. Die in the mines or pass out from exhaustion, the friendly doctor nurses you back to health. This is a game where you become the main character so quickly that even the mystical forest spirits seem dependent upon your cooperation. And for someone that's going through it, this is everything." But mentioned earlier in Screen Therapy's analysis is a question that prompts the entire review. Why is this game so addicting?
Stardew Valley is unique compared to the other games I've mentioned so far in that it has been developed almost exclusively by one person throughout its many updates. Eric Barone, better known by his moniker Concerned Ape, created the game over a period of 4 years. On release in 2016, Stardew Valley went on to sell 400,000 copies over 12 days, spring-launching Barone's career almost overnight. And yet, he's still working on Stardew. Since release, the game has gone through 6 major updates, the equivalent to DLC in any other title. The size of these updates ranges, but they have introduced elements like community upgrades, new buildings, divorce. One of the more recent updates added an entirely new region, Ginger Island, complete with its own challenges, dungeon, enemies, and more. Rather than decrease in size over the lifespan of the game, Stardew Valley's updates only seem to have increased, and partly this was by design. From the game's launch, Barone stated having ideas with regards to every single area of the game that he could expand on. With the game being solely developed by Barone, expanding it was relatively easy to do. He has gone on record stating many times his preference for working alone, but since the game's 1.3 update, he has worked with a team that helps him to execute his ideas. As of the game's most recent update, Barone has taken a step back, assuming the role of a creative director rather than the sole driving force. The reason stated for this decision is so Barone can work on his upcoming title, Haunted Chocolatier. In the 9 years since Stardew Valley's release, only now is Barone producing a second game. And yet, Stardew Valley chugs forward. In August of 2025, Barone announced a 1.7 update for the game, a 7th major add-on guided by Barone himself. This comes a year and a half after the game's 1.6 update, an update that, to quote Barone, ended up being a little larger in scope than originally planned. An update that Barone once believed could be the game's final major update. Of course, Stardew Valley fans didn't necessarily know this, but the sentiment was in the air. Barone had previously claimed a major update could be the game's last major update, though he learned to not do this after 1.5. He even attempted to temper player expectations by noting that 1.6 would primarily consist of modding quality of life updates and a light amount of content. This didn't end up being the case. While 1.6 did end up being smaller than the game's previous update, it remains one of the largest so far. So with a 1.7 update looming, a second game in the works, repeated claims of a last major update, and only one title under his belt, the question demands to be asked, why is Barone still working on Stardew? The answer to this question is the same as the answer to Screen Therapy's question, as well as why the game is one of Hero Journey Club's featured therapeutic titles. Because, simply put, Stardew Valley is timeless. Another timeless game series released its most recent iteration during a particularly good period for escapist gaming. Animal Crossing New Horizons released on March 20th, a mere day before Pippin FTS's video would kick off building the world in Minecraft and right at the beginning of the COVID-19 lockdown. This had a near incalculable effect on the title and one that feels like it's been discussed to death. Look up COVID-19 and New Horizons and you'll get pages upon pages of results. Everything from research papers to video essays to blog posts. There's even one museum exhibit at the National Video Game Museum in Sheffield dedicated to how the game made people feel during the pandemic. The reasoning for New Horizons' success is fairly obvious. Like Build the Earth, New Horizons offered a chance to retreat from the social isolation of the post-pandemic world into an environment that was safe, customizable, and easily accessible. By the beginning of 2020, Nintendo had sold 52 million Switch models. That number would shoot up throughout the pandemic, rising to nearly 80 million sold by December 31st, 2020. The conditions for the perfect storm were set. In the first 6 weeks, New Horizons sold 13.41 million copies, exceeding the lifetime sales of any previous title in the series. By December 31st of 2020, the game had sold an incredible 31.18 million copies, quickly making it the console's second bestseller. But then the number of sales started to decline.
By 2021, many of the US's government-mandated restrictions had been lifted due to the availability of vaccines and an infrastructure that had been reorganized to lower the spread of the virus. Many people returned to a similar life as before, just with more mask wearing and memes about keeping 5 feet apart. Similar to Build the Earth, the interest in New Horizons also began to taper off. Sales had only increased by 4 million in the first 3 months of 2021. People had just lost interest in substituting a digital world for the real one.
But not everyone felt this way. With the combination of a live update system, everyday management, and a quick feedback loop type gameplay, New Horizons remained in the lives of many post-lockdown. After writing this, I want someone to take my Animal Crossing save file and delete it, writes Mitch Clow in his essay Animal Crossing New Horizons and How I Turned a COVID Crutch into a Damaging Addiction. It's difficult to admit that you have any sort of a problem or addiction, especially when you can excuse bad behavior as a means of coping during a worldwide pandemic. One article in Nintendo Life features interviews from licensed psychologists on how to restructure your thinking to free yourself from an addictive cycle of New Horizons FOMO. An official Nintendo survey even teamed up with the University of Oxford to explore the correlation between New Horizons and addiction.
Animal Crossing New Horizons players weren't the only ones surveyed for the study. Other games, including EVE Online and Apex Legends, saw surveys being sent out with similar questions. But MMOs, like the aforementioned titles, are typically grouped separately than games like New Horizons. I mean, everyone knows that MMOs are addictive, right? So how could a cozy game like Animal Crossing New Horizons have made this list, and furthermore proven itself to impact players negatively? More so than half of the games surveyed.
One analysis of the results notes that it all comes down to what you got out of it. It wasn't the quantity of gaming, but the quality that counted, states Professor Andrew K. Shabilsky, one of the researchers who worked on the study. If gamers felt like they had to play, they felt worse. If they played because they loved it, then the data did not suggest it affected their mental health. It seemed to give them a strong positive feeling. Simply put, gaming is good until you're addicted.
There's a term I've avoided using in this essay until this point. Gaming disorder. A bit of a loaded term, gaming disorder is an illness recognized by the WHO since 2019 as a type of video game addiction. In fact, it's one of the only two non-substance related chronic addictions defined, in addition to gambling disorder. Like other types of addiction, gaming disorder is predicated on a habit that interferes with everyday life. Based on the criteria listed, it's incredibly common among today's youth, with one study estimating that gaming disorder affects nearly 10% of all adolescents and young adults. It's also somewhat predictably more common in those who suffer from chronic depression. An analysis published by the Journal of Affective Disorders aggregated a slew of data regarding mental illness and gaming disorder to see if it could find a concrete connection between the two. Conclusively, a link was found, though it wasn't exactly clear what that link was. Regardless, it showed in the data, if you've got depression, you're more likely to be addicted to gaming. But that's not all the study found. FPS, sports, racing, platform games, and even MOBAs all demonstrated a standard ratio of increasingly severe emotional distress. Adventure games, RPGs, and simulation games showed higher rates of moderate and high emotional distress. When feeling anxious or depressed, an escapist game is catharsis. In spite of the WHO definition of gaming disorder as well as the research articles on the topic, it's extremely difficult to say just how real gaming addiction is. Most research on the topic is predicated on the input of university students, many of whom are realizing a simultaneous increase in freedom and responsibility. There's questions about whether time is a particularly useful metric or not in measuring pathological gaming. There's also the inevitable cultural stigma surrounding gaming. I mean, ask any gamer about video game addiction and they're likely to roll their eyes. If the question is whether or not video games are addictive, the answer is unclear. But if the question is whether or not some people are addicted to video games, the answer feels like it has to be yes.
In recent interviews, Eric Barone has mentioned that he has no plans of stopping work on Stardew. He has stated in interviews his desire to keep the game feeling fresh, adding whatever updates he thinks up while replaying to prevent it from fizzling out. As a result, the free updates made to the game take on the role of fleshing out the title rather than creating the now popularized live service model. With the announcement of a 1.7 update, as well as the impending release of Barone's new game Haunted Chocolatier, the reason Barone still updates Stardew Valley is clear. He loves it. And fans of the game do too. Every new update invigorates the modding community. The Stardew Valley subreddit flourishes with newfound secrets and screenshots. It's hard to find people that actually dislike the game. Stardew Valley is a game that has done its best to keep itself feeling modern, listening to the complaints of players and adding new features and fixes through free updates. Screen Therapy's question on the game's addictive nature puts a spotlight on some of Stardew's instant gratification mechanics, but it's also a word that misses the points. People can't stop playing Stardew Valley because it just feels so damn good to play. And it's not just Stardew. Animal Crossing New Horizons is the 5th game in the Animal Crossing series, with each drastically improving upon the previous. Each installation adds new mechanics, updated aesthetics, improved customization options, and more, fundamentally leveling up a formula that has been consistently pleasing to play since the original's release. Even Minecraft, a game that seems grounded in its consistency, is constantly adding free updates. Minecraft today sometimes feels nothing like the game that first appeared in 2009, and sometimes it feels exactly the same. On one side of the coin, the updates in these games flesh out and expand upon pre-existing systems in a way that helps to improve just how wonderful it is to play them. Their timelessness is due to continual improvements, developers learning over time what works and what doesn't. Eric Barone has mentioned that he could keep working on Stardew Valley forever. With so many ways the game could be improved, he never wants to fully shut that book.
But the flip side of the coin is that these 3 games are centered in escapism. Stardew Valley's pastoral existence, Animal Crossing's digital connections, and Minecraft's virtual freedom present opportunities to fine-tune that draw. As the games continue to improve, so too does their allure. These escapist systems quickly make way for a fixation or addiction, as each of the games does not contain a traditional endpoint. Minecraft, in particular, as the best-selling game to date, is currently the subject of multiple lawsuits that state that the game's developers intentionally designed it to be addictive. Is Minecraft actually addictive, or is it just designed in such a way that its easily approachable escapism is a reliable source of comfort? Is there a difference? The difference between addictive and therapeutic tends to be a fine line in all pursuits. When approached like any other source of comfort, the positive and detrimental aspects of escapist gaming should be obvious. But our personal biases can prevent us from seeing this duality. A concerned parent might scoff at the idea of gaming as therapy, while a dedicated gamer might rationalize away any addictive qualities. It's all in the tint of our glasses.
My stint with Stardew Valley eventually passed once I had seen most of what the game had to offer, but playing the game near compulsively during a difficult time in my life had left a mark on me that other games could only dream of achieving. I got over my slump, started working towards my future again, and left Stardew Valley behind. But I never regretted my time with it. Like New Horizons and Build the Earth, 2 creations that would take the world by storm during the pandemic, Stardew Valley's escapism felt like a necessary step in confronting my emotions. I was able to work towards achievable goals during a time where my real-life ones felt impossible, and that was important to me. It's times like these that I'm reminded of the trailers that were released prior to Animal Crossing New Horizons' official launch. Themed like tourism ads for the appropriately titled Deserted Island Getaway Package, these trailers showed us the lives that we could live on these remote, beautiful islands. We see footage of beautiful sunrises, villagers celebrating together, players creating paths and planting flowers, and so much more. In one trailer, a warm voice tells us about everything that our own deserted island has to offer. "Do you hear that?" she asks. "Your new life is waiting." Thanks for watching all the way to the end! If you liked this, or maybe even liked it, maybe consider subscribing or letting me know what you thought in the comments. If you really want to help me make more videos like this, I have a Patreon as well, where you can get benefits like early video access and your name in the credits. Otherwise, just stay tuned. I have a lot more on the way, with a few different projects in different stages of completion. In the meantime, enjoy the rest of me trying to figure out how to create the title sequence. See you later!
Now